This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, this is Professor Broderson. This presentation will consist of demonstrations related to the literature search assignment. I'll go through the main sections of the literature search assignment as they apply to a PICO question that represents my research interests, and I'll demonstrate the requirements in some sections. Lastly, I'll demonstrate a strategy for identifying digital object identifiers when they don't appear on a source document that you've obtained. I'm going to start with a paper that I've set up that reflects the assignment. This is just the title page. And then I have the main sections built into the paper. The first section being to determine the search strategy. And the first thing that you had to do was state a PICO question. And so I've stated my PICO question. Now you'll notice that mine is a little different because I'm looking for interventions that have been used for test anxiety or exam stress in nursing students. So I don't have specific intervention or comparison conditions. So that's why it may look a little bit different than yours. So it's a little bit broader in those areas. And the next thing that you're supposed to do is put a search terms table in. So the instructions said to insert a table with all the possible search terms and phrases, keywords, synonyms, subject headings, and mesh terms for the P, I, C, and O elements of your PICO question. Now, search terms will not necessarily be applicable for all the elements of the PICO question. So if they're not applicable, you're just supposed to type in a underneath the letter or the element. And one thing that I'll point out is this table that I've inserted here is comparable to the document that would be filed in the keywords subfolder of the paper trail folder regarding the Girard matrix method. Okay, so the way I went about identifying these keywords, first I knew that my population was nursing students and the phenomenon of interest was testing and the experiences of anxiety and stress that occur with taking classroom tests. And so I tried to think of all the key terms that would be used to refer to a nursing student, and basically there were just a few. And you'll notice that I've presented them here in truncated form by putting the asterisks. So this collection of words here, nurse and student, would capture nursing students, and then a synonym that I identified was student nurses. And so I did the same thing here by truncating some of the letters so that I would capture variations of that statement with regard to singularity and plurality. Same thing for anxiety and stress, just some basic key terms there. And they're actually, stress was considered a synonym of anxiety, and the anxiety was considered a synonym of stress. Now, regarding testing, there were quite a few more variations that I came up with. So I've got testing, test taking. Looks like I've got test taking in there twice. With a hyphen. So it's hyphenated and unhyphenated. Then I've got academic testing. And you'll notice that I have the word test typed in red, and that was to denote the fact that when I tested this out, it gave me some problems. It would pick up literature that was about or contained the words for diagnostic tests or statistical tests. So I ended up not actually using that term in my search strategy. Had the same thing come up with the word with keywords for exam with regard to exam stress. It would come up with literature that contained the words like physical examination, or we intended to examine X, Y, or Z. So I ended up eliminating that. I had plenty of other keywords and subject headings to get around that. And next, I actually searched individually in the CINAHL and Medlic info databases for their subject headings. And so in CINAHL, the main subject heading for nursing students was Students Common Nursing. And in CINAHL, they denote main subject headings with the capital letters MM. You'll notice other databases will use DE, and that refers to exact subject heading. The PsycInfo database uses DE. PsycInfo database also had a major subject heading of nursing students. So basically, I individually went in and searched the CINAHL subject headings to identify all possible subject headings that would match to my key terms. And then I did the same thing in Medline, only in Medline, the term is MESH term or medical subject heading. And then in PsycInfo and PsycArticles, they use a thesaurus of terms. And so that's where I looked up all of these terms. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have to have yours listed with these capital letters, MM. But for me, my plan was to combine all these terms together. And so I have them all listed together. I'm also not certain about the necessity of having the parentheses around them, although I do know that you need, when you have two or more words or a phrase, you do need to enclose it in parentheses so that the search engine will search on that phrase and not the individual words, so that it won't automatically insert a Boolean operator in there like and or. I also searched the ERIC database. Remember, for this assignment, you're only required to search Medline and CINAHL, and that it will just make it easier for me to check and verify your subject headings and MESH terms. Within Allen College's subscription to EBSCO, I could also search PsycInfo, and then I have access to St. Louis University's EBSCO host, and they provide access to the PsycArticles database, which gives you access to full text articles. So it's related to PsycInfo, but PsycInfo does not give you access to all the full text articles that are indexed in the PsycArticles database. And then I also searched the ERIC database, which is an education database that I could access through St. Louis University's subscription to EBSCO. And so you can see that I, identified even more key terms related to the various terms in my PICO question. And the table gets to be quite long because of the number of key terms. You can see that for tests and exams, there were a lot more key terms in the ERIC database than there were in the CINAHL and the Medline databases, and it's because ERIC's an education database. Okay, and then if I didn't mention it, this table is comparable to the document that would be filed in that keywords subfolder of the paper trail folder. Okay, and then another thing I wanted to show you was that what I did was, after I had all of these search terms identified, I actually combined them into a huge paragraph. Now here it shows the separate key terms. This is the one for nursing students. This is the paragraph for test taking and examinations. This is the paragraph for anxiety. And this is the paragraph for stress. And so I would link those together with Boolean operators, and would be linking nursing students and test taking, and anxiety and stress were linked together with or. So now when I take the paragraph returns out, this is what it looks like. And the idea is that, and it's all enclosed in a set of parentheses. So here's the opening parentheses, and here's the closing parentheses. And then it's got all of the clumps of search terms enclosed. Theoretically, I should be able to take this paragraph, I should be able to copy it, and any database that I would go into, PubMed, Medline, CINAHL, ERIC, I should be able to paste this into a search field and run a search on it. And I should get similar search results that I would get by searching individual databases and then combining my search on those, which I'll do in a little bit. So this is the idea, that you come up with a search strategy that's reusable so that you can rerun the search from time to time if you don't have it saved within an account in one of the databases like CINAHL or Medline, PubMed. Okay, so then the next thing that you had to do, or you have to do for this assignment, is to determine the databases to search. And what you would describe in this section here, just a brief paragraph, you could list the databases that you determined needed to be searched based on information you got from a reference librarian and information that you got from the textbook chapter by Hartzell and Fineout Overholt. So that's what this information is about. And the description in this section could be based on the database list that Gerard advised you to put in the bibliographic databases subfolder of the paper trail folder. Okay. So then the next part of the assignment was to construct, execute, and document a search strategy and results. One of the first things that Gerard advised that you do was establish your, one of the textbook authors advised that you establish your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And so that's what we're having you put in this table. And I provided you a table template to fill in. You could also just list those inclusion and exclusion criteria in separate paragraphs if you wanted to. But one thing I wondered about was why Gerard didn't specify a specific subfolder where you would include your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and maybe I overlooked it, but it's also possible that I'm mixing up Gerard and the Fineout Overholt Melnick book. It may be that it's Melnick and Fineout Overholt who specify that you've got to establish your inclusion and criteria, and I'm thinking that's probably the case. At any rate, here's an example of the inclusion and exclusion criteria that I established for my PICO question. Pretty straightforward. Often your exclusion criteria and inclusion criteria are simply opposites of each other, although that's not necessarily the case all the way through if you read through this. Okay. So then the next step was to actually conduct a search for documents. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to log into EBSCO and show you how I'm going into EBSCO through the Student Services course Easy Proxy. One of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to sign into my account. You can all establish an account in EBSCO where you can save searches permanently. And I advise that you do that because then if you lose a search or want to revisit it at some time, it's always going to be saved in your account here. Just a second here, I'm going to.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, a little trouble getting logged into my EBSCO account there, but so now I'm signed into my account. And the first thing I'm going to do, it's asking me to choose the databases I want to search, and I know that I only want to search CINAHL first. So I check the CINAHL database and I say continue. And then I know that I have a saved search history in here based on my key terms. And so I'm going to retrieve that from my folder. Okay, and this is, if you look down through here, you'll notice that my subject terms are in here for nursing student, test taking and exam taking, anxiety and stress. And then you can see where in a previous search, I combined anxiety and stress with or, and I combined nursing students and test taking with and then I combined stress and anxiety with nursing students and test taking in 5 and 6. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to rerun that search instead of going through the entire process of how I actually built it. Okay, and there's my search output. You can say I got 127 hits with that search strategy that basically is reflected in the large paragraph of terms that were enclosed in quotation marks and parentheses that I showed you previously. Okay, so I've got that search now. That's my search of CINAHL. And instead of taking a screenshot, you could actually print that search history. So you go into search history, and this is the search history that I want to print. So I just go to print search history. And then this shows that, you know, you got 127 hits. It shows that CINAHL was the database that I searched. Now this, so far, it doesn't really have that I set any limiters. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and limit to English. So I'm going to go back to my search results. I'm going to close search history. All right, so I'm going to go down and I'm going to check English language. Okay, so that just limited the search to English language. All right, now I'm going to go back, and you can see it got me down to 121. So there must have been 3 sources in there that were not published in English. Okay, so I go back to my search history, and I go print search history. Now you can see that I've searched CINAHL database in EBSCOhost, and then I've limited to English language. Now, to actually print the search history, there's no print button, so I'm just going to right-click and go print. And dialog box is going to come up. I want to save it as a PDF. And this is what it's going to look like. It's actually 2 pages, which I will insert into our into the paper, into the literature search assignment. Okay, and I'm actually going to store that in the bibliographic databases subfolder of the paper trail folder. And you can see that I've stored a couple of these here before, so I'm just going to do this one as October 31, because that's the date today. So I've saved that there. All right, so now I've saved that search history. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to choose a different database. I'm going to choose, this time I'm going to choose Medline. Okay, and then just to make sure I've got everything cleared out, I'm going to go back into search history, and I'm going to select all the searches, and I'm going to delete them. And this doesn't delete the one that I saved in my folder. Okay, so now that I've got the Medline database selected, I'm going to go to the folder, and I'm going to retrieve my search history from before. So I'm retrieving that same search history that I ran under CINAHL. You can see it's the same thing here. All right, and I'm going to rerun it. And this time I'm running it in Medline instead of CINAHL. All right, so there it is, and you can see that I got only 41 hits. And then if we go to limit that to English, it's going to take out a couple so that we end up with 39 hits. All right, so now I want to print that search history. And it's going to look the same except as the one for CINAHL, except we've got Medline as the database being searched. And so I go to print, save it as a PDF. And it's going to go back to the bibliographic databases subfolder of my paper trail folder. And I'm just going to save it as 1031, the date that I did the search. Okay, so I'm going to X out of that. Now those 2 PDFs that I just saved are what I would insert into the literature search assignment. Instead of putting screenshots in there, I'm going to show you how I would insert that information by taking a snapshot of the PDF and inserting it into the document. One other thing I want to do though is I'm going to clear this out again. And this time I'm going to run the same search, but I'm going to do it in both CINAHL and Medline to show you how it'll delete duplicates for you, or at least I think it does. So we're going to delete these searches. Okay, and then I'm going to choose databases, and this time I'm going to choose both CINAHL and Medline. Okay, and then so then we go to our folder, and I've got to retrieve that saved search again. Okay, so there it is. I'm going to go ahead and run it. Now before, if you'll recall, I had, I think, 39 from Medline and 124 from CINAHL. So if you do the math now, we've got 168 here. And from that, you should be able to figure out if we've got the exact number that we would have if we had searched the two databases separately, or there's possibly some overlap in there. And I'm going to limit it to English. I could do some other limiters, but just for now, I'm going to just limit it to English language because I can't read in another language. And 160 hits is what we end up with. And that's actually a reasonable number of hits to screen, or records to screen, and locate your keepers or potential keepers. Okay, so I've done that, and I'm going to print that search history. And you can see this time we've searched Medline and CINAHL Plus with full text. I'm going to print that to PDF. Save it. And this time I got to put in so that's the two of them together, and I'm just saving that just in case I might want to look at it later. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do now is show you how to insert those into the document. So I'm going to leave EBSCO for a little bit and bring our paper back up. Okay, so right here is where we want to insert screenshots or the printouts. In my case, I'm inserting the printout of my search history, showing meaningful limiters with English being my meaningful limiter. And then I can get to those by, I'm going to go to my master folder, and I'm going to go in the paper trail folder, and I'm going to open up my bibliographic databases folder. And the first one I'm going to open up is the CINAHL search that I ran. So it opens here. And one thing you want to do, this is opening in the Foxit PDF program that you may or may not have, but you can do the same thing in Adobe PDF Reader. But what I want to do first is I want to, right now it's enlarged, so I'm going to reduce it down to 100%. And I'm probably going to have to take 2 snapshots of this to get it to show up in, or to fit in my paper. And so I click on the snapshot tool, and I'm going to select all of this. So now I've taken a snapshot. I'm going to go to my paper, and I'm going to, what's going to happen is it's so big, it's going to go to the next page. So we've got a gap there, but we're not going to worry about that right now. And then I'm going to go and get the rest of it. Okay. So that's the rest of our search in CINAHL. So I took my snapshot, close it, get our paper back up here, and then I'm going to put the second page here by pasting it. Okay, so now we have our CINAHL search inserted. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is get our Medline search inserted. So I go back to my bibliographic databases folder, and I'm going to open the Medline search. Okay, and the same thing's going to happen. It's going to be huge, so I'm going to have to reduce the size down to 100%. What I'm showing you is just one way to do this, so I mean, there's going to be other ways. I want to take a snapshot. So I do the same thing as before. Paper up here. I'm going to go ahead and insert a break here to get that out of there. Control V to paste in my Medline search. Go back and get the second page of it. And it's going to be about the same size because the search is going to look the same basically in Medline as it does in CINAHL. Oh wait, did I open? I'm seeing CINAHL mentioned in here too, and I'm not sure why, unless it's because I've got terms in there, but I'm sure I didn't have the CINAHL database selected when I did this search. So I'm not sure why that's showing up there. But at any rate, you all saw that I definitely searched just Medline for that second search. We'll go back to the paper. Okay, so that's the first pane. It's like the CINAHL starts to show up when the CINAHL subject headings appear. Okay, so now I have my Medline and my CINAHL search is pasted in there. So it's evident that I searched the databases individually. I'll have to investigate more to see why CINAHL shows up at some point. And it probably has to do with the fact that it's recognizing those subject headings with MM in them as being CINAHL subject headings and not Medline mesh headings. Okay, so we've got that part done, and then we move on to the part where we're going to select the appropriate evidence to read. Okay, and in this case, the instructions are specifying that you're supposed to screen the records by reading the titles and the abstracts produced by the search in order to identify the potential keepers. And then you want to take screenshots or do printouts like I did of potential keepers. And where you want to mark or check the potential keepers is within EBSCOhost or the database you're searching. And then you'll do the screenshots to put in your actual assignment. And then you want to eventually you want to look through the keepers reference lists once you have the hard copies of them to identify additional records to keep. Okay. And alternately, you could export those potential keepers to a spreadsheet or reference manager software. So for this step, I'm going to go back to EBSCOhost, and I've got my 160 results here from the searches of both databases, which is fine. So I'm going to look at these and see which ones I think are relevant. And if they're relevant, I'm going to add them to my folder. Now, before, I've already actually added some of these to my folder from a previous search. Okay, so when a source has not been added to your folder in EBSCO, you'll see a little folder here with a plus sign on it. But once you've added it to your folder, then it'll just, the plus sign will go away and it'll look like a manila folder. So this looks very relevant to me. It's an intervention, hand massage for text anxiety. Also self-efficacy was included here, and nursing students. So I'm gonna, that looks to me like a potential keeper. So I'm gonna check that. And we've got relaxation techniques on nursing students, academic stress and test anxiety. So looks like another relevant source. So I'm gonna keep that as a potential keeper. And here's one, positive prompts, a quick exercise to reduce test anxiety. That sounds promising. I don't know if it's a report of a study or what it is. So I'm still gonna keep it to further screen. And then we got interventions for test anxiety, how faculty can help. These are all recent publications. I'm gonna check that because it looks relevant. Here's conquering test anxiety and how not to let it conquer you. That title to me sounds like it's possibly not a report of a study of an intervention. It could be just a general literature review. So I'm gonna go ahead and check it because I should probably screen it further by reading its abstract. And then the next one is an effective inhaled lemon essential oil on cognitive test anxiety among nursing students. I've selected already as a potential keeper. And we got peer assisted learning with simulation for examination and transition success. The word simulation in there suggests that this may be about simulation testing and not possibly not course exams. So that might be an exclusion, but I won't know until I investigate further. So I'm going to put it in my folder. Then we've got the role of academic self-efficacy, social support on nursing students' test anxiety. So those seem more like variables than interventions, but it still sounds interesting to me. And so it may be something I want to keep for some other reason. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in my keeper folder. And I could keep going down through, I'll just go through the first page here. And then we've got quantitative analysis of anxiety levels of nursing students studying bioscience in Australia. That, I think, doesn't really sound like it's related to test anxiety. But to be sure, I should probably read the abstract, so I'm going to put it in the folder. Then we've got modeling antecedents of clinical examination performance, task characteristics, and psychological state in nursing students. This is a clinical examination. So it might be something other than a classroom test. So I'm thinking that's probably not relevant, but just for the sake of being sure, I'll add it to my folder. Now that's all the further I'm going to go. I would continue going through each of the pages of results. And it looks like there's 10 pages or 10 results per page. And so there's going to be about 16 pages of results that I would have to go through to do some screening. But for now, I'm going to go up to my folder and do some deeper screening. Okay, so this first one, I mean, just by virtue of the title, I'm pretty sure that's one that I want to keep. But I want to go in and read the abstract. And it says the purpose of the study was to determine if aromatherapy, hand massage. Reading on further, I think that's a definite keeper. Now, if it were available in full text, then I would save it to the source documents subfolder of the documents subfolder that I've got in my set of matrix method folders on my personal computer. And I would do the same thing with any other keepers that I identify. If I didn't see it in the, if it wasn't available in full text, then I'd want to be sure to keep the bibliographic information because I want to submit an interlibrary loan to get that. The second one is Conquering Test Anxiety, How Not to Let It Conquer You. If I go in and read the abstract, I find there is no abstract. So for this one, I'm kind of stuck. I can't rule it out because I don't have enough information about it. So I'm going to have to save that one, the bibliographic information, and request an interlibrary loan on it. So then I go back and I look at the third source, Effective Inhaled Lemon Essential Oil on Cognitive Test Anxiety among Nursing Students. That sounds very promising. So I go in, I read the abstract. Cognitive test, yeah, if in reading this, I can tell it was a type of test of an intervention for test anxiety. So I would definitely want to keep that one. So I go back to my folder list then, and I would proceed in this same fashion all the way down the line here, and going through all the sources that I identified in my initial screening as being potential keepers. Let's just assume that all of these are potential keepers. And so I'm going to select all of them. And then I want to just show you a couple of things you can do to get the bibliographic information. Because in addition to getting the hard copies or the full text versions of each of these sources, you also want to have a listing of the bibliographic references. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is various ways to get that. And a really easy way is to just, now you'll notice that I've checked all of these. So presumably I'm checking all of the potential keepers. And one thing you can do is you could email these to yourself. Another thing you could do that I think is kind of useful is to, I'm not really printing them to hard copy. I'm going to print them to PDF form. And you can do this in various ways. You could actually print them with a standard field format with detailed citation and abstracts. You could get a lot of information there. You could just get the brief citation. What I want to do is print them to the APA format. So I'll have a list of references in APA format. You can actually choose to remove them from your folder when you print them, but I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm only going to print this to PDF, so okay. So it comes up and it looks like this. It looks rather messy, but if you look closely, the 10 sources that I had saved are all listed here. And this can actually be helpful to you because you can actually copy and paste this information into a reference list, and then you just have to go through and fix the errors that EBSCOhost made in APA formatting. So you can say, I'm gonna save it to PDF. So I'll do that. And I'm gonna save it in this bibliographic databases folder. Actually, I'm gonna save it in my documents folder. Okay. And I could save it in my source documents folder. Let's say right now I don't really know which of those documents I'm going to actually keep. So I might just save it outside that folder. I might even create a new folder called bibliographic citations from EBSCO CINAHL Medline. Okay, so I'm going to save it in there. And this is, I'm just going to call it like search results 1031. Or maybe I should call it possible keepers 1031-19. And so there's my list. All right. Another thing you can do is that you can export these. So I got to make sure they're checked. And this is probably how I would do it. Okay, so you can export them. You can export them to these various reference management software options, or you can export to EndNote Web, which is the web version of EndNote, the EndNote application that you could actually have on your computer. There's all kinds of options here. I am going to export to CVS because that will allow me to open it in a spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet, which is kind of the poor man's alternative to having reference management software if you don't have the money to buy it or the time to learn it, or whatever. There are some free reference management software options out there, and I believe Mendeley is one of them. But in this case, I'm just showing you how you could download these into an Excel spreadsheet that you could use in other ways. Okay, so I'm going to open that. You can see it's opening in Excel. All right, as you can see, we got all this information here, including a URL to the EBSCO database, which is not particularly useful. So I would probably just delete that. You could kind of look through here and delete other information, but we've got our article title, we've got our authors. And so based on this information, you could construct a reference list. You would just have to make sure it was formatted in APA style. Okay, and I'm just going to save this. I'm going to save it to that documents folder. Actually, I want to go. I'm going to save it in the documents folder. And I'll save it in my bibliographic citations from EBSCO. Okay. I'm just going to use the same title. So I'm going to save it as a Excel file. Okay, so now I've saved that there, so I can close this file. Then we're going to go back, and I'm going to show you one more way to save your search results. And before I do that, I need to open EndNote. I happen to have EndNote, which is a reference management software that allows you to save all the bibliographic information about a source, plus you can also link the PDF of the full text to it. Okay, so this is my bibliographic database for exit exam stress, which is what I did for my dissertation study. So you can see all the sources that I have in here. And so I'm just showing you that right now because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to export these citations to that database. So I check them all again, and then I hit export. This time, instead of downloading as CVS, I'm going to leave this checked, export in RIS format, which is going to allow me to open that export into EndNote or any of these other reference manager software databases. I believe Zotero is another free reference management software. I don't see Mendeley on here. Okay, so I did that. I'm going to hit save, and I get a weird looking thing down here, which basically, when I open that up, it's going to automatically dump those in to EndNote for me. So there are those 10 sources that I checked on that first page. It looks like one of them doesn't have an actual author, positive prompts, which is a sign that it's probably not going to be a report of an empirical study. It's probably just going to be some general interest article. It is published in Nurse Educator, which is a very reputable nursing journal. And then what I can do is once I have the full text of these sources downloaded, I can actually attach them here. And I don't have them. I mean, I would navigate to my folder where they're stored, which is, let's see. I'm going to go to my master folder, my documents subfolder. And let's say in here I had source documents in this folder, which I really, perhaps I have them in reports of empirical research. I could navigate to this folder and click on the file that relates to this title and actually attach it here. But I don't have any of these downloaded, so I can't actually do that yet. And once you have the PDF of the full text attached, you'll see a little paper clip over here showing that you've actually got the PDF, and then you can scroll down to find it, and you can actually open it from within your reference management software. Okay, so those are just several ways to download your lists of references that Gerard refers to as being stored in the source documents subfolder of that documents folder. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you there. And from that point, then we're to the Prisma diagram, and Prisma diagrams were provided to you in, I believe, PDF or Microsoft Word format. You could download them that way. I find the Microsoft Word version easier to work with because you can type right on the document in the space beside the lowercase n and the equal sign to indicate how many sources you have. But it requires some math in order to figure out what to fill in those areas. So I haven't actually spent the time to do that on these searches that I just conducted. So, but if I were to do that, it would require, I could only do that after I had screened all the sources and identified the keepers that I was actually going to have, and the ones that didn't meet the inclusion criteria or had some sort of exclusion. So I haven't really, I haven't created it so that I can paste that in here. But regarding, let's see, screenshots or printouts that would be stored in the source document folder. Okay, so I've stored things there, and so what I can do, going back to the select the appropriate evidence to read, is open up that source documents folder. Okay, so let's say that I had downloaded sources into this file. I could open it up, and then I could take a screenshot of that file and then paste it into my document. And I'll just do that right now. Okay, and what it's going to do, because I've actually got two screens showing, you guys can only see one, is it's going to show two screens when I do this, but I'm going to paste it in, and there it is. So this is my source documents folder over here. This is just a list of topics that I'm covering, so you wouldn't actually paste this into your document. Like I said, it's just showing up because I've got two screens showing. So when I do a screenshot, it's taking a shot of both my screens instead of just the one that I was showing you. So that's what would be pasted in there. All right, so that takes care of the information I wanted to cover regarding the literature search assignment. So I'm going to minimize this, and then there's one more thing that I want to do, which is to show you that you'll notice that those that Excel document that I downloaded from EBSCOhost with the list of 10 sources that I had identified as potential keepers. I'm actually going to open that. Oh. Oh, it didn't open correctly. Sorry about that. Well, anyway, there was a column that had DOI numbers in it. Now, if you don't happen to have, actually, maybe I can find it here. Oh, here it was. I forgot to save it as an Excel file. It's still saved as a comma delimited file, so that's why I was having trouble opening it. All right, so you can see here, we've got DOI numbers for most of these sources that I downloaded, but we don't have one for conquering test anxiety and how not to let it conquer you. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the article has not been assigned a DOI. And the reason I'm telling you about DOIs is because it's a lot easier to create your reference list entries if you've got a DOI number, because if you don't have a DOI number assigned to a journal article, then you have to look up the journal's homepage and use the URL for the retrieval information. It just becomes more cumbersome and awkward. So what I like to do is I tell students to go to crossref.org, which is like a central location for all digital object identifiers. And you want to go to search metadata. And I'm just going to type the title of that article in here. I copied and pasted it. And then hit return after you've pasted it in. All right. It doesn't come up. We see conquering communication anxiety, but there isn't a source for conquering test anxiety and how not to let it conquer you. So this article simply probably just doesn't have a DOI assigned. So in that case, then what we would have to do is we have to find out what journal it was published in. And it was published in Imprint. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to Google that. I'm just going to say journal. Okay, imprinted journals, customized journals, custom imprint. And I believe Imprint might be the Nursing Student Association journal. So that may be, yeah, that's what it is. Okay, Imprint is the professional magazine for student nurses. Okay, so that's an article published in Imprint. And so what I'm going to do, because there's no DOI, I'm going to copy the publisher's homepage URL, which is this right here that I just highlighted. And that is what I would use in place of a DOI. So I would and this may be different, I'll warn you, in the 7th edition of APA style that Allen College is going to move to next semester. But currently, if a journal article or periodical doesn't have a DOI assigned, then you use the journal publisher's homepage URL as the retrieval information. So that's what I put for this retrieval information for the purposes of creating a reference list entry. All right, so that would take care of that. All right, that, I believe, takes care of everything that I wanted to go over today. Let me just we'll look down through the agenda and just make sure that we've covered all these topics. And if you have questions about anything in this presentation, please post them in the questions discussion forum. And with that, I'm going to stop recording and end this meeting.